Hi everyone, I'm Francis Cabildo. I am from Southern California. Thanks, Eugene. I know I got a haircut today. Feel pretty good about it. Um, anyway, stop interrupting me. Jeez. Um, let's see. I am full-time. Work at a Catholic high school as a campus minister, but I've been working for the church in some kind of ministry capacity for about 25, 26 years. And it's been a joy. Started in a parish working as like an assistant youth minister / musician, just singing for mass and youth group and prayer meetings and stuff like that. And then God called me to be in full-time ministry and youth ministry. So started in a parish, and now in the last 14, 15 years, I've been in Catholic high schools, working as a campus minister, and also, writing songs, leading worship wherever God calls and people need some help with that. So that's a little bit about me, what I do in ministry-wise, but full-time, more than full-time. I'm a husband to my wife, Nicole. We have 5 kids, ages 14 to 6 months. So yeah, that's who I am. What else you want to know?
Where'd you get your haircut?
What's your skincare routine?
My skincare. Oh gosh. So my wife works at with like Rodan and Fields, so she has all this. So I get some perks of all the products that she sells. But yeah, you've got to.
Do you use toner?
I do. I use reverse lightning. It's true. The secret is moisture. Moisturizing is the secret, everybody.
Sweet. Well, thanks for sharing your skincare routine, Francis.
Thanks.
With all
Not
of us.
your routine. That's just some of the products. So. If you need some, you can ask me.
All right. So I want to get into this topic of discovered and being developed by God. I know it's especially like as worship leaders, like we've talked about this, but I think this applies also to creatives just in general. So just a little bit of backstory of like what me and Francis were discussing for the rest of the group. There are a lot of times where, where we feel that we're already at the top of what we're doing in terms of being a creative. There's no room to be developed. And sometimes we can kind of create this ego of like, oh, I'm really doing this for myself, not doing this for the right reasons. And so this whole concept of what does it mean to be developed by God, meaning what does it mean for us to go back and allow God to speak into our art, to speak into our gifts and talents, and to be able to share that with others, compared to being discovered by man, for us to be doing our art for the gratification for others. So I guess, Francis, the first question I want to ask you, like, what does it mean to be developed by God versus discovered by man?
Yeah. Gosh, I think that's an important question to start with. Or to kind of start thinking about, especially when you're getting to utilizing your gifts and talents. We started talking about this when we stumbled upon this video that Christine Kane, it was one of her talks at a Bethel conference. And she talked about this being discovered versus developed, appointed versus anointed. And she said so many good things. So I'm just going to pull a couple of thoughts that she had from that talk. If you're really interested and want to get the full spectrum of what she's talking about, you can look up Christine Kane on YouTube. It's available. You can watch it for yourself. But I was just going to highlight a couple things that she said there. Like, I don't know how many seasons we've had of like American Idol and all those contests where people are discovered, right? You go to an audition to be discovered so that you can get a record deal or some kind of contract professionally for the gifts that you have, like whether you're a dancer, a musician, or a comedian, etc. But people go on there to be discovered. And I think that's kind of the trend in the last, maybe decade, with the dawn of Instagram, like instant, right? Instantgram, the immediate attention grabbing, immediate discovery. And to be honest, like to be really honest with ourselves, like we put posts or pictures up on Instagram or Facebook. I think it says like every daily there's 250 million images uploaded on Instagram, and then about 450 million on Facebook. So we're putting all these pictures and images of, our dogs, our food, our cat, and mostly it's ourselves. The majority of images that we put up on these accounts is pictures of ourselves. It's the hashtag selfie. That's the most popular hashtag, I believe. Because we want people to discover who we are or discover what we do, to shed light on who we are. And there's a problem with that though, because I don't know about you, I took in college a long time ago, I'm still in college, but I took a photography class. And this is actual like photography, not digital photography. It's like with film. So you have you snap all these photos, you adjust your aperture. I'm not a very good photographer, by the way. I hated the class. I was just so bad at it. But you would take these pictures, and then you would have to get the film out of the reel and put it into this canister in the dark, putting it in, and then putting the solution and all the chemicals in there to develop the film so that you would have a negative. And then from that negative, you go through this process of imprinting that image or exposing that image on photo paper. And this is all done in the dark room. So there's the series of steps for this image to be developed. And what happens too, like if that image, as you're developing it, or you're working with the negative, hanging it, letting it dry, if somebody opens the door and turns the light on, those images are ruined. But I think what's happened in our recent times is like we want that instant discovery by God or by man, like to see, so that we can, for men to see us, so they can see what we can do, the art that we make, the creation that we've want to display and share, whether that be music, paintings or whatever, poetry. But with God, you have to be developed. It's not this instant gratification, because one of the things that Christine says in there, she says, if the light that's on you is brighter than the light that's in you, the light that's on you is going to destroy you. And so I've been thinking about that and chewing on that for the last couple of years, and how that's affected my ministry. Because early on, I grew up with Matt Maher and all those guys, and I saw what he was doing. And early on in starting to lead worship, I always thought, like, man, I want to do what Matt does. At the time I was singing for my church, just playing for mass and youth group and all that stuff. And then I started getting restless. I started getting impatient, and I started treating people as a means to get where I want. In a sense, I'm looking past over the people that God has given me to serve, because I'm thinking of an image beyond them, beyond where I was. And I remember having a conversation with my wife, Nicole, and she really puts me down to earth. And she's like, Francis, if you and every other musician does what Matt Maher does, then who's going to be singing at our churches? Who's going to serve at our parishes? And so that took me back. And I took a step back from that whole idea of getting on the stage, right? To finally, I've arrived. And from that point on, I think I've allowed God to really develop me into who I was. Another thing that she talks about is like with King David, when David, when it was time for God to anoint a new king, for Samuel to anoint a new king, you know, God told Samuel, go and anoint the new king. David wasn't even in the room when they were choosing. Like what was obvious to man, like Eliab was like the oldest, strong, he was dignified, and he was ready, but he wasn't the one that God chose. Samuel was like, do you have another son? He's like, yeah, he's not even here. He's young, he's over there tending to the sheep. So they call David, and David gets anointed by the king. There you go. There's the scripture verse right there. And he gets, he's like, yeah, that's the one. That's the one that God is that God is choosing. So God doesn't really necessarily choose what's the most obvious, right? But anyway, so God chooses David, and David gets anointed. He is to be king. He is actually, once that anointing happened, he is king. But it wasn't until 20 years later that David assumed his role as a king. He wasn't really appointed to be king. So that whole time, God was developing him to learning how to be a king, learning how to rule, learning how to be just. And of course, we know David wasn't perfect, right? But just because you were anointed doesn't mean that the time of appointing happens then and there. One of the things that she talks about being developed versus being discovered, like when man discovers you, like if we put our worth in how man puts our worth and our value, then that's all you're going to get. That's all the applause that you're going to get, because that's what you sought. But if we seek to be developed by God, I think our ministries are going to be more in line with the will of God. So that's a little bit about being discovered and developed. I think we can't be too hasty or be in such a hurry to make our mark. But sometimes we just have to allow God to develop us in that dark room where nobody even knows who we are. We're spending our time like, okay, God, like how are you going to reveal your beauty through what I'm going to create? How are you going to reveal your truth through the song I'm going to sing? I think when we spend time with God, allowing us to be changed by his grace, I think what we're going to give to the world is more of a better reflection of who God is, not of who we are. Because I know if I lead people to me, the only place I can lead them is to hell, because I'm a sinner. But if I'm leading them and pointing them towards heaven, towards a discovery and an encounter with Jesus through the beauty that we create, I think that's more in line with what God wills for us. Does that answer that a little bit, Ricky?
Yeah, definitely. Really like that. Really like those points, Francis. I get one of the next questions too that I want to ask is about the concept of performance versus performance and spectacle. I think that personally for me, especially when I was starting as a creative or as a worship leader, I always found myself being immersed in this whole thing of like, this is a performance, this isn't prayer, or like my art, like this is something for me to show to everybody, but this isn't a prayer. So I guess I want to see if you can kind of break this down a little bit of how can we change our perspective of performance or like our art into more centered around prayer rather than that spotlight on us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a difference, right? And I'm gonna apply this towards worship leading because that's I think where God has called me to be. it stems from humility. I think it needs to start in humility. Um, Jesus, who's the master, washed the disciples' feet. He's the one that served them. He's the one that got on his knees, put a towel around his waist, and washed their feet and cleansed them. So I think we need to strive to be like Jesus, first and foremost, and to be humble like him, to be a humble person that's willing to serve. And also humility is understanding who we are. I am not God. I can point to God, but I am not God. I'm not the destination. I could be used by God as a guide, as a signpost, as a magnifying glass to reveal to people who God is, to show to people who Jesus is and point towards him. Just like St. Andrew did, right? Hey, I found a Messiah. Come over here. Let me show you who he is. So I think if we are in that mindset of being a servant, then the performance aspect of what we do kind of fades away, especially in ministry. Of course, I mean, there's performers and that's what they do. They're entertainers. And there's a right time and place for those things. And those are to perform doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or sinful or it's taking the glory away from God. If you're funny and you're gifted with comedy, gosh, you make people laugh and you're using your gifts, what God has given you, to the best of your ability, that gives God glory, right? Because you're becoming who God meant you to be, right? You've allowed God to develop you and to become who God sees you to be, not who you think you need to be. So if we're humble and we use our gifts for God's great glory, right? St. Irenaeus says, and this is highly quoted, right? The glory of God is man fully alive. How can we be fully alive? We can become fully alive when we become fully developed by God, pointing in the right direction, utilizing the gifts that he's given us for the glory of God. That's how I come alive. I love youth ministry. I love, putting on retreats for students and organizing events and stuff like that. But where I mostly come alive is when I'm leading people in prayer and worship. And I'm gonna kind of go back to the performance thing, is because, I'll be the first one to tell you I'm not the most gifted. I'm not the most talented. There's so many other people that play guitar better than I do, and sing better than I do, and look better than I do. But I think where I am in my life right now, I think I'm pretty secure on what God has called me to be, because I think I've allowed God to develop me. I'm still developing. I'm not by all means a completed masterpiece. But I've allowed God to really develop me, to really go to that place in the dark where nobody knows, only God, and cultivate this spirit of humility, and also, like, I need to know my destination. Right? Is the destination the experience? Is the destination the praise and worship I just led? Or is the destination beyond that? I think we need to be clear. If I'm leading people to me, that's going to be more performance. That's just all about me. But if I know my destination, I know where I want to lead people. I want to lead people to an encounter with God, to be one-on-one with God, where they can be face-to-face with the living God. And then performance doesn't get in the way. Now, don't get me wrong. We still have to perform, right? I have to play guitar. I have to play the right chords. I have to sing the right notes for me to do what I'm asked to do well. So I have to develop those things well enough so I can lead people and not become a distraction. But the most important thing is we need to know our destination. Where are we leading them? The third thing, I think, when we're talking about performance, is you have to be confident. Because I think performance in a ministry setting stems from an insecurity, stems from feeling inadequate. And I feel that all the time. and I have God, invite God to really work on that part of who I am. But I need to be confident that God's called me to do what I need to be doing. Because sometimes I look at in a room and I'm like, why am I up here? That guy's a better singer. That person's, but I have to be confident in what God's doing in my life and how he's called me. And the only way I'm going to be confident in that is if I've spent the time to be in prayer, to allow God to humble me and to know where I'm leading people. So there's kind of three parts I think that help us to avoid performance, is to be humble, to know where we're leading people, to be confident in God's calling for our work.
I love that. And I know that we have a lot of people here who are part of the community who are brand new to like their creative art and like applying that to ministry and into prayer. And I've talked with a few of them, and some of them have said, I don't think my art is good enough to be shown to people. I don't think my art is where it needs to be. I don't know. I want to see, like, maybe there's a few things that you can share about that, like for people who feel that what they're doing right now is not good enough, but they feel like they should be doing it.
To be honest, it's never going to be good enough. Because here's what I went through when I recorded an album. The moment I released that album, the moment I released it, I felt, I could have done this better. Maybe I should have said that. Maybe I should have said it this way. But here's the thing is, once we document something in a permanent setting, like we create something and we put it out there, it's a reflection of where we've been. And we're constantly changing because we're alive, right? We're constantly moving forward, right? Blessed Junipero, Saint Junipero Serra said, siempre adelante, always forward, always ahead. So once I recorded the song, it stays static. That's what the song is. But my life, my experiences, who I am continues to change and develop and grow. So it's always going to be not good enough because you're always going to be looking back to where you were. But see, God is not a God of where you were. God is a God of where you are right now and where you're gonna be. And so we're always gonna have that feeling of my art is not good enough. And I know this because I've talked to artists that are like internationally known, like, the top Catholic Christian artists, and they feel the same way. Like, I've documented something of where I was. Now I've got to create something new because I'm in a different place. Maybe you've had a different experience. Maybe you got married from the time you created that piece to where you are now. You're different. Or maybe there was a death, or maybe there was a pandemic. You're different. We're different. So our experiences are always going to be new. But the art that we made back there was just a reflection of where we were. So we're always going to struggle with that. Our art, our creation is not going to be good enough. So that's one point. But the second point is just strive to be better. Strive to be better. It's like, hey, here's a song that I wrote. Here's some lyrics that I wrote. Look for ways to get better. Present the lyrics to somebody that you trust and that that will give you honest and good feedback. And learn from that, critique, and get better. But also it's as creatives, we create things that it's like part of us. So I think it's tough when you present something out there for people to view, to listen to touch, to taste, to feel, or whatever, if you're a cook. And then there's an element of, what if they don't like it? What if they reject it? When they reject it, did they reject me? And so I think that's part of where we need to go when we're developed, when we have the confidence that, hey, I'm expressing this art where I am, and I pray that it is an expression of my, you know, if it's religious art or religious music, that it's a reflection of who God is to me and who the Creator is to me. And if we rest on what He thinks of what we're doing, He'll never reject that. He'll take it and He'll perfect it. But if we give it just solely to man, then that's when it becomes scary, because we all know we've experienced rejection. That's not good enough. You could have done better. Apply yourselves. You know, we hear that when we're growing up in school. Why didn't you get an A? Why did you get an A-? You know, so there's this insecurity that's been kind of embedded in us that we've listened to, we've learned, we've allowed to shape us, and how we approach our creativity and our work. And so there's a fear of that. I think that's what it all comes down to, really, is a fear of rejection. But if we're sitting in that dark room, confident in God's love for us, then when people do reject some of the things that we do as a creative, I think it's okay. I think we'll be able to deal with it and learn from it. And maybe they're saying something good and valuable. Like, maybe I need to, yeah, you're right. I could do this, and maybe that would be better. And then you learn and you apply that to the next art that you can create or whatever.
What is some advice that you could give someone right now, a creative who is really trying to find themselves in their art and trying to be discovered, and kind of like making it come full circle of how to stay rooted in Christ as you're being developed?
Be yourself. Be who you are. Of course, you're gonna take risks and challenge to learn a different skill or a different way of doing things, but be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. And sometimes we're inspired by other people's work, and that's okay. But we can't be them, because we don't know what their life is like. We can't understand fully who that person is, and the way they're going to create is the way who they are. So I think we just need to be honest and just be ourselves. One of the things that Christine King, she says this in this talk too, there's grace enough for your race. If you try to run somebody else's race, there's no grace there for you, and you'll run out. You'll tire out, you'll burn out, you'll get frustrated. So in a sense, stay in your lane. Like, no, and that happens in the development, right? And that never stops. We continue to be developed and redeveloped and refined and polished throughout our whole life, because our life here on earth is going to be imperfect. But if we allow God to, spend that time for God to develop us, all those things can be ironed out. But remember, just to be yourself. Like, I can't be Matt Maher. I can't be Ike Ndolo. I can't be Andrew Laubacher, right? I can't do all those things that they do. But I can be Francis Cabildo. I can figure out what I'm good at, what God has given me, and then say, okay, God, this is what you gave me. How do you want me to use it? There's people out there that write brilliant songs, but they're not good singers. So they write songs for other people. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to do everything. I find for me that I'm not, I work best when I collaborate with people. And I've discovered that, throughout the years of, like, I'm going to try to write songs, and I bring it to people. And like, hey, you know what? When we're actually in a room together with 2-3 other people, the songs are better. So I know that I work well in a collaborative setting. So I'm going to continue to, to develop that part of my songwriting and invest in the time to collaborate with other people. But you got to be yourself. You have to be yourself because there's no other you. I mean, this is cliche. This is all like, you've heard this, right? There's no other you. Only you can be you. So be honest and be true to who you are.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Francis, for
Yeah.
sharing that with all of us. Go ahead and thank Francis in the chat. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of us as creatives struggle with, is how to really balance that about being developed by God, allowing our gifts to really be an expression of Christ's love, and for us to share that with others versus us wanting to be discovered by man.
Yeah. And what, Ricky, one other thing that I wanted to mention, it's like,
yeah,
stop comparing yourself to others. And I think that's so prevalent, especially with social media. We see pictures and everybody else's art, right? How many times we go to our phones to see how many people liked the image that we put up, like the picture that we put up, how many hearts did we get, how many thumbs up did we get, like, oh, that person got X amount, I only got this amount. And all of a sudden we take our worth in those analytics. God loves everybody equally the same. He does not have more grace and more love for somebody that's, for, Michelangelo creating masterpieces versus, the art teacher teaching first grade art with finger painting. God sees all of that as valuable. God doesn't see what Mara does in a worldwide scale more important and more crucial than the lowly youth minister or music minister that's singing in front of 30 kids in the youth group. Because if we start comparing ourselves that we're not good enough, I'm not that, God can't use that. Because it turns it into ourselves, about ourselves. So stop comparing. Be inspired, be challenged, but don't compare. Because you're you, your art is you. Express your love through what you do. And who cares? Because he sees it as valuable. And that's, I think, where we need to put our worth in. Right? You are not what you do. Your love, or God loves you for who you are, not what you do, and not what you do for him. It's because who you are is his son and his daughter, and he loves you, regardless if you make good art or not.